I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're diving into a unique blend of science and spirituality with an amazing author. His name is Alvin Clark, and he has penned two powerful books. One is called Echoes from a Spiritual Name, and the other is called From Science to Spirituality, An Unexpected Journey. In Echoes from a Spiritual Name, the author brings a fresh perspective to the Shiva Sutras, while his memoir traces his path from scientific exploration to profound spiritual realization. Join us as we explore how ancient wisdom and modern insights converge in this remarkable journey. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight, and we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing books. The links are below this interview. Alvin, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I really feel honored by it.
Honored to have you on the show. Your books are great. They're insightful, and very anxious to talk to you about them. Talk to us a little bit first about what you mean when you say you discovered spiritual experiences.
Well, they happened to me. Spiritual experiences happened to me by surprise. I was in a workshop called EST, Est Earhart Seminars Training, and I was, this was now my first spiritual experience, and I was told, along with all the other people taking this course, that sometime during the 2 weekends, I would discover what is the sound of one hand clapping. And so I tried to work it out for the first weekend and then the interval between that and the second weekend. And suddenly on the fourth day, I got it. I knew what the answer was. And the way I experience it is I do this. It's as if I were twisted one notch higher, and yet my body hadn't moved. And so it was my consciousness that was raised. That was my first spiritual experience, and I discovered many more since.
Now, would it be cheating to ask you what is the sound of one hand clapping?
No, it's not cheating at all. And the sound of one hand clapping is the sound of one hand clapping. It can't be anything else. It's a truism. It's
Yeah.
and it's so fantastic because trying to work it out intellectually doesn't work. Didn't work for me. It's just what it is. Everything is just what it is. Things are what they are. They're not something different.
Yeah. And so don't overthink it. Accept things as they are. And
That's
sometimes
it.
the answer is staring you in the face. Don't miss it. Before
Yes.
we talk a little bit more about those spiritual experiences, tell us a little bit about your scientific career.
So I went to the University of Rochester, which is in northern New York State, and graduated with a bachelor's degree in chemistry. And then I went to Harvard for a PhD and got that in chemistry. But my interests changed to genetics, and especially the genetics of bacteria. And so I became an assistant professor in 1962 at the University of California in Berkeley. And it was there that I had my first success, my very first graduate student. And I discovered, so at the time, genetic recombination was a mystery. And there were many theories about it, but in order to actually discover how it worked, one needed to know what enzymes were involved in that, because they would give a clue as to what the steps were for the DNA molecules to break and rejoin. And so my student and I discovered the first mutants in which one of the enzymes of that path recombination did not work. And so that's the way in which one then looks to see what proteins are inactive in that mutant. So we published our paper in 1965. It set a whole flurry of activity around the world of people working on recombination. So that was my beginning, and I worked on recombination for what, 30 years more. So that's a short
Well, it's an
view.
illustrious background and some remarkable accomplishments. You went to the best schools and you truly have a scientific mind. Is a scientific mind mutually exclusive from spirituality? I guess not. You have found a way for them to be together. Tell us a little bit about this transition, if you will, from science to spirituality, or perhaps it's just an evolution of integrating both.
Well, yes, from that very first experience, I got well, it was an evolution, actually. Werner Erhard, who uh, uh, invented the EST program, uh, introduced a Swami from India to an Est audience. And that person was named Swami Muktananda. And it took me 4 years before I became a follower of Siddha Yoga, which is the meditational practice that Swami Muktananda introduced into the West. So over my shoulder, you can see a picture of my current guru, who's Muktananda's successor. And so I have as my interest in the practices of Siddha Yoga increased, my my interest in science decreased. And so I retired early, actually, in 1991 in order to audit courses, learn more about human consciousness and the South Indian religious practices. And eventually my grant funds ran out, and so I it continued with the spirituality. So it was kind of, one increased and the other decreased.
Yeah. One decelerated, one accelerated. Tell us how you've incorporated these spiritual practices in your daily life.
Well, I meditate twice a day, 25 minutes each time, morning and afternoon. And so that's my main practice. I used to go to the Siddha Yoga Center here in Tucson. I moved here from the Bay Area in 2001, and there's a Siddha Yoga Center here. And so I would go and do chanting and meditation, listen to the guru's words. And so uh, my physical abilities are less now than they were. And so meditation is my main practice.
Wonderful. Well, you look terrific. You mentioned you had a higher degree by the in 1962, so we know you're um, above middle age, let's just say. And I think all this yoga and I think
Absolutely.
all this meditation has done great things for you, no doubt. And you have a great aura as well,
I
which
see. Thank
emanates
you.
across the screen, without a doubt. Tell us a little bit about how your time in City Yoga and your relationship with Swami Mudhananda influenced your spiritual journey.
Well, the um, the experiences that I had during that time are the really influential things that happened to me. I had many experiences during meditation, past life experiences. I had experiences of unconditional love for everything in my vicinity. I had a 3 week experience of peace and serenity, which I'd never had before, and I have so those things are a taste of the enlightenment that can come to a person by the grace uh, of the guru and the grace of the divinity. And so, I keep working on it.
Yeah. Wonderful. Wonderful. I know you mentioned the paradigm shift when you were posed with the question, what does one hand clapping sound like? What would you say your most transformative spiritual experience has been that you've encountered along the way?
Oh my goodness, so many of them. Um, I imagine that the um, certainly the past life experiences have been very transformative. Um, One of them, let me share one of them with you. I was, I took a Sierra Club trip into Northeast Pakistan in 1977. And after that trip was over, I took a 5 day trip into Afghanistan and went to a small town about 100 miles west of the capital city, Kabul, to a small town called Bamiyan. And Bamiyan was a place of great Buddhist spiritual um, importance. And so there were at that time in the cliffside of that the cliff bordered the town. There were two great standing Buddhas. The Taliban destroyed them in 2001, but in 1977 they were there, and I got the itch to meditate at the foot of the great standing Buddha. And so I sat down and in the darkness there in a little grotto at the foot of that Buddha and began to meditate. And all of a sudden, I thought I was a 12-year-old boy in a yurt, that is the kind of cloth houses that Mongol nomads live in, and that I was undergoing a puberty rite. And uh, the men outside were talking about what I would do after I graduated from this ceremony. And I said, I don't really want to do any of that. I want to um, go about my life in a different way. And the experience lasted for, I don't know, 5 minutes or
Mm.
whatever. And then I came out of meditation and went about my journey. So that I think that so the during the experience I thought, oh, it's the 800s of the Common Era, and I so I'm going to speculate, and I do that in the book at the very end of the book on from science to spirituality. So why have I been so interested in the Shiva Sutras of Vasugupta? And Vasugupta lived in the 800s, the 9th century, and I and he lived in Kashmir, and Kashmir was on the Silk Road. And so was Bamiyan on the Silk Road. And I've visited many places on the Silk Road, Samarkand, Bukhara, Kashgar in China. And I wonder if I wasn't, after, going away from the Mongols in Mongolia, if I didn't go to Kashmir and be there at the time that Vasugupta was teaching and teaching about the Shiva Sutras. Maybe I even heard about the Shiva Sutras from him. I don't know. That's just a wild speculation.
Yeah.
But my interest in the Shiva Sutras has been the focus of my study in Siddha Yoga.
Tell us a little bit about your views on reincarnation. You've alluded to them a little bit here, and your views on karma as well.
I see. Well, reincarnation is what I've just been talking about,
Right.
and the main message of the Shiva Sutras of Vasugupta, that is that each of us is our consciousness, and that consciousness at the core is divine consciousness. So reincarnation then is there's a telephone call going on in the background. So reincarnation then is a way in which that consciousness can move from body to body after physical death. I don't know how that works, but so karma is something else. And there I have had one dramatic experience of karma, which is the theory that you kind of get what you deserve. So I was in an auto accident in 1973. I turned in front of oncoming traffic without looking. I was not injured very much. The guy who hit me suffered some facial injuries. That was on the Ides of March in 1973, and that's the 15th of March. Exactly 6 months later, almost to the minute, I was in another accident in which a driver turned in front of the van that I was driving, and I got the steering wheel across the throat. That guy was drunk. I was so that was exactly the opposite accident. Exactly 6 months from that time, on the Ides of March 74, I didn't have a car at that time. I stood at the bus stop, and a woman driving turned in front of oncoming traffic, and there was an accident right in front of me. And that is just, and that kept happening. 5 years later, on the Ides of March, a person, my neighbor, backed into my car. And here in Tucson, almost 50 years later, I had another accident in which I grazed the car. I was trying to go through a yellow light and turn. And so that's the workings of karma. Just
Amazing, amazing, and
fantastic.
lends new meaning to beware of the Ides of March, no doubt.
Absolutely.
Without a doubt. Let's talk a little bit about science and spirituality. You know, a lot of what you believe in, a lot of what you've experienced, a lot of what makes your life worth living, a lot of what's unique about our existence can't be explained by science, right?
Right. That's correct. That's
Is it?
correct. And a lot can be explained by science. And that's why science is so important in the world. It gives us technology. And it also gives us a way of understanding the things that we think are material and out there. So science is very, very important. But people have spiritual experiences. Lots of people have spiritual experiences. And I once gave a sermon at the Unitarian Universalist church that I go to. And the sermon was about spiritual experiences. And afterwards, the minister asked the congregation, how many of you have had similar experiences? At least 70% of the hands went up. I was absolutely astonished. They hadn't talked to me about their spiritual experience. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So one of the things I hope will come from readers of my books is a willingness to talk about their spiritual experiences with others. And let's make that a topic of conversation, like the weather and
Yeah.
like politics and things like
Yeah.
that. So that's what I hope.
I feel like we live in an age now where people are more likely to be open about speaking about spirituality or less likely.
Well, I think less likely as I say, as a topic of conversation. If I go to a dinner party, for example, people are not talking about spiritual experiences. Um, I try whenever I go out to seed the conversation. I did that once on a trip to a national park here in northern Arizona. And um, I mentioned past life experiences. And at the end, near the end of the trip, one of the women shared a fantastic experience, her experience with me. And so that I described that in the book. It was an absolutely amazing thing. And so, that's what I would like people to do. And some of my friends have shared their spiritual
Yeah.
experiences with me.
That's the importance of being open and self-disclosing to people because a lot of things today are poo-pooed, particularly by the elites and the intelligentsia, that they dismiss religion, they dismiss spirituality in favor of science. The two are not mutually exclusive. You can have science and you can have spirituality, as evidenced by
Absolutely.
your life. You're a man of
Yes,
science, you're a
exactly.
man of
Yes,
spirituality. Yeah. You've
yes.
spoken about the Shiva Sutras. Explain to the folks at home what the Shiva Sutras are.
Well, they are literally 77 short Sanskrit word groups. And most of the words in those 77 groups are nouns. There's only three verbs among those. And so they convey they're considered to be the root text of non-dual Kashmir Shaivism. So they, as I said before, they confer this message that who it is that they're about human identity and who it is that we really are rather than who it is that we think we are. We think we are our body, our mind, our history, and so forth. But at, really, we are our consciousness.
Mm.
And that is what the Shiva Sutras are all about. What I've done in my book, I can't, all the courses that I've taken, take these 77 sutras one by one, teach them one by one. But I can't remember that kind of thing. Too many things. So what I've done is to group the sutras into 16 and English paragraphs because I've rendered each of the Sanskrit word groups into an English sentence. And so 16 paragraphs. Vasugupta teaches his students in English those word groups as the 16 paragraphs. It makes a narrative out of the Shiva Sutras and easy to remember. So that's what I've done in the book Echoes from a Spiritual Name.
That's a great service. 16 paragraphs are much easier to digest than 77 principles as standalones. I have trouble remembering the 10 commandments, so 77 would be tough, that's for sure. Let me ask you, what do you hope that readers take away from this book, or these books, I shall say?
Well, of course, one of the things is the willingness to share spiritual experiences, but the other is an interest, perhaps, in learning meditation from an authentic teacher. So I hope that people will realize that meditation is a practice that can lead to fantastic experiences, wonderful spiritual experiences. So I hope they get that from that also in these books.
And they'll get great health benefits from it as well. Meditation is one of the few things that can clinically reduce high blood pressure.
I
So
see.
if we
Okay.
divorce ourselves a little bit from the stress and the happenings of what's happening around us, look for that inner peace. Do you have a mantra when you meditate?
I do have a mantra, and I use that to begin my meditation. That is correct. And I've
Basically to
always
clear
had
your
a
mind.
mantra. Siddha Yoga teaches an introductory mantra, which is Om Namah Shivaya. I greet the divine consciousness in myself.
Mm.
That is the introductory mantra of Siddha Yoga, and that's the mantra I used in Siddha Yoga meditation for many years.
Do you feel that the spiritual techniques and revelations that you talk about in your book are compatible with Christianity? I don't see why they wouldn't be.
I don't see any reason why they wouldn't be either. My
Yeah.
sister was a confirmed Presbyterian. I think she was a Presbyterian from birth. And so it was her it was her main practice, and I had absolutely no trouble talking with her about her Christianity and going to her church and participating and reading the books that she read and so forth. So there's absolutely um, um,
Conflict. Yeah, without a
no
doubt.
conflict at
Yeah.
all. Yes.
Yeah. These are wonderful books we've been talking about, both written by Alvin Clark. The names of the books are Echoes from a Spiritual Name and From Science to Spirituality, An Unexpected Journey. In Echoes from a Spiritual Name, the author brings a fresh perspective to the Shiva Sutras, while his memoir traces his path from scientific exploration to profound spiritual realization. These are great books. They just might change your life. They might just change your perspective, and they might just change your heart and your soul. Alvin, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
I appreciate your time, your wisdom, and your insight. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time, this time until next time on Spotlight.